Welcome back to Alpha Mama 2022. We are up to episode 3 of the Alpha Mama podcast for this year. So we're running a little bit behind schedule with our podcasts at the moment, but we are getting back on track very quickly. So Alpha Mama brings you the lowdown on books that change your lives in the self-development space. We do the reading and research so you can sit back, listen and take steps to live your best life and move towards a grounded life that reflects your authentic self. Growing up, I didn't feel like I had a lot of great guidance, and the lack of guidance in my own life led me to make choices that accumulated in me hitting rock bottom by the age of 30. I felt like I had no one to turn to, and that's when I turned to books and researching how to live my best life. Fast forward almost a decade and I have experienced total transformation. At Alpha Mama, we believe it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. The only thing you need to succeed at your life is the belief that you can and the commitment to carry through with backing yourself. So today we are looking at finance. So exciting. So the 3 pillars that I like to focus on in this podcast series, we look at the creating the plan and creating the vision, and how do we do that and how do we get there. We then focus on the discipline and developing the habits and the skill set that we need to get us there and keep us motivated towards our goals. And then finally, the other key one, resources. So not only looking at financial resources, but resources around increasing abundance in your life and a sense of abundance, so that you have your cup full and you are able to move towards your dream life, because we're all about being dreamers and really also turning our dreams into reality. You know, that's what I like to try and achieve. So today we are looking at finance. The book that I read this week is called On Fire by Tom Cromwell. Who is Tom Cromwell? So I couldn't find a lot of information about this guy, Tom. And I sort of listened to this book on the fly, so I've taken sort of loose notes and I'm just going to wing it this week. We'll just see how we go. Basically, he, on his website, which is personalfinancewizard.com, and I'll put it in our finance notes for you, so you can look at it in your own time if you like, because there are some great resources in there or on that website. He basically suggests that he is a financial planner. There is a photo of him on his website, and basically his passion is finance, and he's written a few different books. On Fire is a sort of review of the FIRE movement. Now, if you haven't heard of the FIRE movement, it's all the rage in the disruptive finance sector. So, you know, like the Uber of finance, FIRE stands for financially independent, retire early. And so really the focus is on financial independence and retiring as young as possible. And the way that people in the FIRE movement do that is they start investing as young as possible. So they scrimp and save by increasing their income as much as possible and reducing their outgoings as much as possible, and then save, and then as soon as they've saved enough, they just invest either in property or shares, basically, and then they try and achieve. So there's a lot of planning around this. You look at trying to get an annual return of, say, like at least 7 to 10% on your investments, and then once you've met your threshold of what it is you want to save for your retirement. So say, you know, you think, oh, well, I need $1 million to retire, or it's something like 25 years of income, basically, valued of that saved, and then you live off like 4% of your returns per annum. So that's kind of the ballpark. And some people are able to retire as early as like 35, 39, and then other people in their 50s or late 40s. So I've been very seduced by the idea of FIRE because it's all about achieving financial independence. And I think one thing that the author mentions, so Thomas Cromwell, in this book that is worth noting is that so there's a lot of frugality in this method. So it's not about necessarily being a millionaire or living the rich lifestyle. You know, a lot of the FIRE movement people live in like tiny homes or caravans, and they buy their principal place of residence and then they move into a caravan and they like rent it out, and then they work full time as well, and save off, like pay off the mortgage as quickly as possible kind of thing. Or you know, if they do shares, then they just like, it's like a constant investment. But people take some pretty extreme measures to do this like saving method, which is, it's, you know, not a far cry from what a lot of other people do nowadays. Like they move in with mum and dad until they can save enough to buy a house and they don't pay any rent and so forth. So it's not a bad idea. So what were some of the key principles that he mentioned in terms of the FIRE movement being successful? So two key things were discipline and time. He suggests these are the crucial elements that you need. Time is not your friend. So the older you are, obviously, the more aggressive strategy you've got to take. So if you, say, start in your early 20s and you do this frugal living and you do this investment saving and you save and save and save, and put everything away and live in a caravan and have your kids in a caravan and drive around Australia and rent out your house and all this sort of stuff, then you're probably, and you do that consistently with discipline, then you'll probably be able to retire by your like mid-30s or whatever, but you've lived this very frugal lifestyle in the meantime. And then yeah, obviously time. So you've got to do it consistently over time for the method to really work. And with the FIRE movement, I mean, they say retire early, but really the idea is more about being financially free. So financial freedom, so that you are in a position of security where you have the freedom to do whatever you want. Maybe you want to go start a business, maybe you want to write books or live on a tropical island, I don't know. But the whole philosophy behind the FIRE movement is to be debt-free and to have that freedom, have that security in your life, and to be able to survive maybe frugally off your investments and forever, basically. So if you can establish a solid investment map, and the key to that really, he suggests in his book, is diversification, I suppose. Then he does talk a lot about stocks and stock markets. And actually a lot of people say this. So, you know, on average, the share return, the market return on average per annum is 9 to 10% overall. So in chapter 4 of the book, he gives you some great little tips on how to do shares easily if you're not already invested in shares. And what he suggests is buying into index funds. So index funds are like these funds that just mirror that whole market over the time, and so it's not an as aggressive return, but it's also a low risk return. So because on average the market's always returned at least 9 to 10% per annum, then by investing in index funds, then you'll at least have those returns most likely over time. And you know, he suggests the keys to being a good investor is not getting emotional about it, not pulling out when you're scared, or when your shares start dipping, and then obviously the longer you're in the market, the better. Putting all your reinvesting all your dividends back into your portfolio rather than cashing out on them is obviously going to make a huge difference over time. It's going to create a huge cumulative difference in your long-term financial growth in the market. And it's hard to say, I mean, like, is this book relevant right now? During COVID, the share markets have seen some massive downturns in recent times. Well, I think most people will argue, probably in the finance world, and I'm not an expert in this area, that we've seen many crashes over the last century, and it's always bounced back and it's always come back stronger. And actually what his advice is in this book and what he suggests is now is the best time to be investing in shares. You know, when the market's low, when it's crashed, when there's a downturn, you are likely to get the greatest growth on your investment, because lo and behold, if you've got it at the low point and then you hang on to those shares, they'll eventually come good and you'll get a lot out of it, which is fantastic. So look, overall I thought it was a good book. I've read quite a lot of financial books. It wasn't my favourite, I'll be honest. I do recommend the website, you know, go check it out. Definitely he provides you a lot of information about shares and investing in the stock market. I suppose, like, going through the book, what I found was that actually the information he gave made me feel overwhelmed when it came to the share market. So, you know, being an investor, if you chose to, say, invest in certain shares, you know, he noted it's really important to know the company like your best friend, read their annual financial report, get to know them, pay attention to the news. Look at how they manage their company. Who are the managers? Who have they got in power there? What are their management strategies? I mean, it's very involved. Like, if you kind of need to almost do it full time, I think, if you really wanted to get into the share market. And there are definitely people I know out there that are obsessed with the share market, and I can see why. You know, like, if you're interested in companies or you're interested in a certain industry and you're really clued up on who's who and who's in bed with who in that industry and where the market's going and where innovation's going and growth's going, then great, you know, invest in that that market, and you'll probably make better choices than someone who just, you know, had no idea. So he has sold me on the idea of index funds. You know, I'm comfortable. I do have some shares. I think I'm comfortable with investing in sort of index funds if they're just reflective of certain markets that I am keen to support. I think that's great. You know, he also talks about having a plan and having a budget and sticking to your budget and being consistent and having discipline. So I'm definitely a huge fan of budgeting. I think it's really important to know your numbers, know what types of numbers you're trying to achieve in your life. What do you actually need to work towards so that you do have freedom in your life? So they're all good tips and strategies for moving forward. I mean, the key takeaway really was, being financially independent is what we should all be striving for. The whole thing with the FIRE movement, I suppose, is this idea that we've been sold a lie. When we go to get financial advice, when we go to banks, they encourage us to borrow money and get into debt. And, then we spend a lot of our lives paying off debt and being a slave to our debt. And is that really what you want? Does that create the quality of life that you want? And the level of security if you're constantly stressing about how am I going to pay all my bills every month or whatever. So I am still very fond of the FIRE movement. What Tom Cromwell points out though is, not everyone's going to be a millionaire or a multi-millionaire. And the FIRE movement definitely isn't a strategy for getting rich or getting rich quick. And it's definitely not a mascot for the luxury lifestyle. So if you want to live a luxurious lifestyle and, be flashy and, have your neighbours think that you're wealthy when in fact you're just very neck deep in debt, then probably FIRE movement isn't for you, because a lot of it is about being really frugal and thinking really creatively about how you can save money and minimalize. I personally love it. I think one thing, I'm just going to quickly touch on a couple of other books, and we'll talk more about minimalism in the next podcast. So there's another book, The Barefoot Investor, by Scott Pape. A lot of people would have heard about it, and I will do a podcast on that later in the year. So one of Scott's strategies is to actually just focus on, so know yourself, and then only spend money and focus on things that really matter to you. So I think that's a great strategy. The other thing that I really love is minimalism and the whole concept behind minimalism. If you are focused on streamlining your life, less is more, and getting rid of unnecessary stress and clutter in your life, like thinning down your wardrobe and reducing the amount of clutter you have in your house, and being really honed in on just the few things that you really do need, and then not having all the clutter and rubbish taking up your life and energy and time unnecessarily, then minimalism is a great technique to adopt. And strangely enough, the less you have and the less that you're wasting money on, because you've been really conscious and directive of where you're putting your attention and your time and your energy, then obviously the more you're going to save money, because you're not unnecessarily spending money on shit you don't need, just because someone, you saw something flashy in a shop, or your neighbour got it and you thought, I've got to get that too, or whatever. If you have a really clear understanding of who you are and what you want, and you cut out all the unnecessary noise in your life, then amazingly you don't need all the extra stuff, and you save all that stuff in cash basically, and you can invest it in cool things like shares, and spend your time getting to know companies like they're your best friend. So I'm not quite sure that I'm personally ready to take that next plunge into becoming BFFs with companies and reading their financial plans, etc., reports every year. But for those of you who are, it's a great way to go. And I think the key thing with shares is that they're a long-term investment. So you've got to be in the game for at least 20 years, if not longer. Towards the end, Tom talks about kind of these other strategies with shares where you or bonds or something, and you buy in for like 6 months and then you hop and hop and hop. And if you do the technique right, you can make a lot of money very quickly, but it's also quite high risk, he suggests. But basically the other thing that he says is just to have a plan and then stick to the plan consistently with discipline, and don't jump off the bandwagon as soon as you get scared. So yeah, interesting book. You can, so it starts off with, you can retire as a millionaire. Well, you probably can if you sacrifice a lot. That's what he says. Well, I am not 100% sold on that argument, in the sense that I don't think sacrifice, just talking about Scott Pape's model and about minimalism, I don't think sacrifice is necessarily a bad thing. I don't think you have to sell it as sacrifice. I think you're just being really intentional and specific about what you do want, and then cutting everything else out and not worrying about those things. So something to think about. Look, it was an alright book to read. Did I learn a lot? Not really, other than, yes, I would like to be financially independent as soon as possible. Bring it on. Bring it here. Let's make it happen. And I am not going to go crazy on stocks at this stage, but maybe now is a good time to start investing in some stocks, because it's the market's not going great at the moment, so it's a good time. Yeah, I do recommend checking out his book. So The Personal Finance Wizard, Thomas Cromwell, personalfinancewizard.com, and he's sort of got all these different posts on budgeting. So he's got a budgeting tool on there, and he strongly recommends the budgeting tool. I think there are some other really, really great books that we're going to get into later in the year. So I'm excited about sharing some of those with you, but definitely check it out and check out the website and see if it's got any useful information that you can utilize in your life. So he covers topics like budgeting, paying off debt, retirement planning, investing wealth. Oh, that was another thing that he mentioned in the book. So the Snowball Effect, and it's a strategy that people use. So he suggested 2 different techniques to pay down debt. And one was to start with your smallest debt and then pay that off, and then you slowly knock off, like dominoes, one debt after the other until you get to your biggest debt, and you get cracking into that, and you don't have these other subsidiary debts holding you back. But the other thing that he suggested, or the other technique, is to do the same thing, snowball effect, but instead start with the debt that has the highest interest rate, because that's the greatest leak in your tank, because you're paying way too much interest. And if you, just Finance 101, the first credit card I ever had, I think I was 19 or something, completely oblivious to anything about finance, and it had like Qantas frequent flyer points on it or whatever, and I thought, oh yeah, that's cool, $2,000 credit card, whatever, needed it as a student to fill the gaps when I was a bit, in a hard place. And lo and behold, I wisened up a few years later, discovering that my credit card had a 22% interest on it. That is freaking crazy. 22% interest. Can you believe it? I bet you can't, but that is right. And often, if you check your credit card's interest rates, it may have a default rate, may have a lower interest rate, but then the default rate may be, up there like 16 or 18%, which is crazy. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. At that age, as soon as I discovered that, I was like, what am I doing? And I changed to a low interest credit card that only had 8% on it, and that's probably on par with a car loan or something like that. So if you haven't already done that, or if you're not all over that sort of stuff in your own life, one of the first things I'd do with any of your debt, like I don't actually even have a credit card at the moment, but one of the first things I would do is actually go and look at, do you have a car loan? Do you have a home loan? Do you have any other debts? What are the interest rates? Can you get a better interest rate? If you can't get rid of that debt immediately, can you roll it into a different plan with a lower interest rate? Right now is still in the market a great time, because interest rates are so low, to refinance any debt that you have, or roll all your debt into a low interest loan. Even if you were refinancing your home to then pay out all the other debts you had at a really low interest home loan rate, that would be great. And that would just be a great starting point. So if you've got debt, that is the first place that I would start personally. And that is my 2 cents for today. And that is the podcast for today. So On Fire is the book by Tom Cromwell. Go check it out if you're interested in the FIRE movement and in investing in shares. And his website again was personalfinancewizard.com. I'll put it up on our site as well, so you can look it up and find out more information for yourself. So until next time, next episode, in light of the finance and getting our resources all sorted, I'm going to do a podcast on minimalism. So I look forward to seeing you next time. Very excited to have you on board, and chat to you later. Okay, over and out.